does a technology company you once only dreamed of rise to the very top and become a name on everyone's lips? What is the story behind Apple, the name that now stands behind the technology products we use at home, at work, while listening to music, exercising, in short, at every moment of our lives? Today, Apple is known as one of the most powerful and valuable companies in the world. But this story did not begin with carefully crafted business models, flawless investor presentations, or massive capital. Apple's birth was the result of curiosity, impatience, and an imagination that refused to accept limits. This is the story of people who did not follow the rules. And from the very beginning, it was never really about technology, it was about a human question. Why do these machines feel so cold and distant? In the early 1970s, Steve Jobs was working at Atari. Atari was one of the most innovative game companies of its time. Yet even for Jobs, it was chaotic. He walked around the office barefoot, ignored conventions, and struggled to work with others. But at Atari, Jobs learned something crucial. Technology could be fun. He didn't just see circuits and code, he saw experience. After some time, Jobs left for a spiritual journey to India. When he returned, his mind was clear. He would chart his own path. He left Atari because building someone else's dream was never enough for him. At the same time, Steve Wozniak was working at Hewlett. Wozniak was quiet, introverted, and seemed to understand electronic circuits instinctively. At night, he designed his own computer at home. During the day, he went to work. In 1975, he joined the Homebrew Computer Club, a community where computer enthusiasts freely shared knowledge. It was a breeding ground for the personal computer revolution. When Wozniak presented his homemade computer there, he only wanted to share it. But Jobs saw something else. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a product that could be sold. Wozniak's computer was built on a single circuit board, cleverly designed to use fewer and cheaper components. At the time, chips were expensive and complex. Wozniak created a system that achieved maximum functionality with minimal parts. Jobs immediately recognized its commercial potential. While Wozniak wanted to give it away for free, Jobs convinced him otherwise. They would sell their own computers. There was no company, no capital-only belief. This was the moment Apple's core DNA was formed. Technical genius paired with visionary marketing. In 1976, the Apple was created. It had no case, no screen, not even a keyboard. It was simply a circuit board. But that board made the idea of a personal computer real. Apple I units were hand-soldered one by one in the garage of Jobs' family home. To buy parts, Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Wozniak sold his most valuable possession, a calculator. This was the first sacrifice engraved into Apple's identity. Apple was becoming more than a business. It was becoming a belief. The Apple I was not a massive commercial success, but it made an impact. Local computer stores began to show interest. That interest made one thing clear. Apple could no longer remain amateur. This was when Mike Markkula entered the picture. Markkula was an experienced businessman who saw raw potential in Apple. He invested heavily, wrote a professional business plan, and helped establish the company's corporate structure. Apple was no longer just a dream shared by two young men. It was now a real company. With Markkula's arrival, Apple began to grow rapidly. The company was officially incorporated, employees were hired, and product development accelerated. During this period, Apple optimized its own circuit designs, reduced costs, and scaled production. Steve Jobs demanded that products not only function perfectly, but also look beautiful. He believed that even the internal components parts no customer would ever see had to be aesthetically pleasing. This obsession laid the foundation for Apple's design philosophy. In 1977, the Apple II was introduced and it changed everything. With color graphics, a built-in keyboard, and expandability, the Apple II was perfect for homes and schools. Thanks to Apple II, Apple generated millions in a very short time. The company grew rapidly, went public, and became a serious force in the technology world. Apple was now a brand that competitors had to watch closely. But growth also brought conflict. Steve Jobs' perfectionism created tension within the management team. He was demanding, harsh, and uncompromising. The Macintosh project represented the peak of Jobs' human-centered computer vision. With its graphical user interface and mouse, it fundamentally changed computing. But sales failed to meet expectations. Internal pressure increased, and tensions reached a breaking point. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of the company. It was one of the most dramatic moments in Apple's history. After leaving Apple, Jobs founded Next. NEXT was not a commercial success, but technologically it was far ahead of its time. The systems developed there would later form the backbone of Apple's future. For Jobs, this period was not a defeated, was preparation. Without Jobs, Apple lost its direction. Too many products, an unclear identity, and declining sales pushed the company toward bankruptcy in the 1990s. Few believed Apple would survive. Then, in 1997, Apple acquired Next. This acquisition marked Steve Jobs' return to Apple. When Jobs returned, he made radical decisions. He cut down the product line, clarified the company's focus, and restored Apple's soul. Then came the iMac, colorful, bold, and unmistakably different. Apple was being talked about again, but the real revolution was still ahead. To help me keep making videos and improve myself, you can buy me a coffee via the Buy Me a Coffee link below. You can also support me by subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment. These mean a lot to me and are very important for creating content. Thank you. Now let's get back to the video. The iPod and iTunes placed Apple at the center of everyday life. Apple now controlled hardware, software, and content at the same time. This ecosystem laid the groundwork for the iPhone. Introduced in 2007, the iPhone reset the entire industry. Once again, Apple changed the game. In 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. Tim Cook took over as CEO. Cook was not a visionary like Jobs, but he was an exceptional operator. Under his leadership, Apple became a trillion-dollar giant. Services expanded, and Apple transformed into a more stable, less surprising but immensely powered. Under Tim Cook, Apple entered a period of transformation that was evolutionary rather than revolutionary. Cook turned Apple into one of the most operationally efficient companies in history. Supply chains were optimized, costs were controlled, and Apple accumulated unprecedented levels of cash. While critics claimed Apple was no longer innovative, the company quietly became the most profitable corporation on the planet. During this era, Apple gradually shifted its focus from hardware to services. The App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, and Apple Pay fundamentally changed Apple's business model. Apple was no longer dependent solely on one-time product sales. Instead, it built a recurring revenue ecosystem. This strategy made Apple far more resilient to economic uncertainty. However, it also fueled criticism that Apple had become too closed and too powerful. In recent years, Apple placed privacy and data protection at the center of its brand identity. By positioning itself as a guardian of user privacy, Apple differentiated itself from competitors whose business models relied heavily on data-driven advertising. At the same time, this stance triggered serious conflicts with developers and rival companies. Accusations of monopolistic behavior intensified. Apple defended its position by claiming it was protecting users. This tension revealed a new reality. Apple was no longer just a technology company, but a global economic and political force. Today, Apple may no longer deliver the radical surprises of the Steve Jobs era, but it has become far more stable, powerful, and influential. Apple's success no longer depends on a single visionary mind, but on a perfectly functioning system. What began in a small garage has evolved into a structure capable of influencing the global economy. Perhaps Apple's greatest achievement is its ability to continuously redefine itself. And this story, even now, is still being written.